welcome to Mesa de Guerra. This is Sergio here. Welcome another night for this interview that we have tonight with Miss Chimo. Hello, Chimo. Good night.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Javi. Hello, night.
Hello.
And
Night.
Santi. Hello, Santi. Good night. And we four are going to interview our guest. Special guest tonight is Dan Bullock. Dan, good night.
Hello.
Hey, Dan.
I have never been interviewed by four people at one time.
Are you prepared?
I am as prepared as one can be. It has the air of a firing squad. Interesting odds, but I like it as a dynamic. Very good.
It's going to be easy. So we have prepared 4 blocks, and each block is going to be asked for one of us. I'm going to be the first. For me, it's just taking the personal block, and I'm going to ask you firstly, who is Dan Bullock, and what you do in your usual life?
In my usual life, I would say in my usual life, I spend a lot of my free time playing music, writing music. That's something that I did for over a decade. I played accordion and guitar and marimba in a touring band. I use none of that in my career, and I use none of that in my design. But it's something that I enjoy doing, and I set time aside every single day. So I play music for at least an hour every single day.
And you say accordion?
Yes. In Wisconsin, that's more normal.
Okay.
Than everywhere else in the United States. Normally, if you entered someone's home in the US, the odds of you finding an accordion are very slim. If you enter a home in Wisconsin, where I'm from, 1 in 4 odds.
So 25%.
So I just happen to be in the part of America where accordions runneth over. It's just very plentiful. So
it's curious. Okay, so next is going to be
maybe you can play it. Maybe you can play a little bit later for us.
I'll go to YouTube for that. It's all over. I'll send you links, but okay. I think that's kind of the extent of it at this point.
How do you begin with the board games? In the beginnings of your playing games, or in your childhood? Are you kids or something?
Sure. I started playing role-playing games when I was in junior high. Dungeons and Dragons was our big opening into that world. And whenever we didn't have enough players for our usual Dungeons and Dragons game, we would play a board game.
Okay.
So early, it was some war games, like Kingmaker was like one of our first ones we played. Yeah. I loved Mark Simonich's Hannibal, like warm place in my heart for all of time. One of my favorite games of all time. He's just the master. And just playing different board games like that, and slowly over the course of years, I role played less and less, and I played more and more board games with friends. And those board games became more and more complicated, more and more historical. That's just what I liked. So that's sort of what drew me to the hobby initially.
So you have...
I would say that this is similar to a lot of people, no?
Yeah.
To me, for example, it was similar to you. I started playing, of course, Dungeons and Dragons, but also a lot of the Rings, Zulu, and games like this on roll, and later on changing to board games, and at the end, war games. So, yeah. Historical games, let's say like this, because historical games, I would say. Yeah.
Did anyone else start with role-playing games
Yeah.
before playing board games?
Just me.
No,
Yes.
I'm too shy to play role-playing games. I feel like, yeah, it's just everybody's just acting, and I'm here like, okay, I do that. It's just I'm not in the
No,
mood.
I started with board games
Okay.
earlier than with role playing.
I think you'll find many of the role-playing game players are not very intimidating. They're generally theater kids, actually. It's very mellow. It's not but they're not intimidating. But I find that curious that about half of us started with role-playing games, because one of the things that interests me the most about historical games is there's a little bit of an immersion in the history and in a role. And the way, to me, I always internalize how good a game is how it makes me feel when I'm playing. And that is definitely something that I have brought with me from playing role-playing games. Like, how do I feel in this moment playing as this side? I love, like in Twilight Struggle, sick to my stomach the whole time. I think that makes it one of the best games ever, and very, like, just so perfect. It's like such a great design. And even though there are little elements that maybe aren't perfectly balanced or like exactly as maybe someone would develop it now, it feels right. And I think the feeling is what I go for first before I do anything else that require a spreadsheet or any other kind of design deep dive.
So just talking about that, for you, is what is most important, mechanics or thematic?
Theme is definitely the most important. I don't think that players generally read the historical materials in the book. So it's important for them to get a sense of the history from how events, like historical events, change the game state, and also how they feel when they're playing it. If you want them to act stressed out, they're playing as the Kim regime in North Korea, and you want them to act frantic, trying to respond to a lot of threats, you need to put anxiety on them. They need to feel anxious, and you need to have that there the entire time. And I feel like if that isn't the feeling, they're really not going to come away from the game having learned much of anything. So to me, it is always like theme first, very heavily. And I think mechanisms are great, and games that have innovative mechanisms can be fun. But I think the criticism that a lot of Euros have very light theme and very heavy mechanisms is generally correct. But I think we often understate how difficult it is to come up with novel mechanisms. That's very good design. Like, it's still good design. It's just, it's a very different thing. If we had a thematic war game that was 6 hours long and had nothing but innovative mechanisms and novel, system, I don't know what that rule book would look like, but I bet it's a nightmare. I think it's terrifying to players. It will be very hard. I think we need to borrow a little when we're going to be a little more thematic.
Yeah.
When you play it for 6 hours, you need to feel the theme. Otherwise, you won't play for 6 hours.
Yeah.
I think.
I've been playing, or had been playing, Downfall. Have any of you played Downfall at all? There are a lot of new design elements in it.
The new GMT design.
Yes, from John Butterfield and Chad Jensen. Both very good designers, but there are like 3 very large new things happening in it.
Yeah, it is.
And as a result, the game is a lot. It's a lot to take on. It takes a long time to play. I think that generally that can be overwhelming for a lot of players to take that on.
It's
no one here, but in the public.
Like, yeah, it is.
For sure.
It has just like 3 or 4 mechanics that it feels like Euro mechanics applied to the to war games, and it's just one thing that is right now is just using a lot by designers, taking things or taking mechanics for Euros and just merge with wargaming and just making a new things. So this one is just one of them.
Yeah, I agree.
So talking in other terms, going deeper in the issue, in designing a game, what would be the major challenge for a designer? Some kind of balance between theme and mechanics, or any other stuff like this?
I think making a game based off of a historical thesis is very challenging. Translating the point you want to make into a system that will depict that point, but also must be fun. Like it has to be fun. If it's not fun, you have an exercise. You don't have a game.
Yeah, you have an exam or.
Yeah,
I was going to say that.
That's very difficult.
Yeah.
I've made a few designs. Hopefully, I haven't published any of them, but I've made a few designs where I was able to put that thesis into a design, model it, and played it. It's just not fun, and it's because the thing that I'm modeling, it's accurate, but there's not that device, there's not that feeling in it. It's just an exercise of modeling this period of history, and so you kind of have to go back to the drawing board and find what would make the game fun. And sometimes that means taking the history in the game and making it a little bit fuzzier or a little soft focused, I would say.
Not so
maybe
historical.
Like maybe
not so guided, historically guided.
Yes, exactly. You want like maybe 80% of what you want to model, but then you leave the other 20% where it is a competitive game and anybody can win, even though historically not anybody can win, depending on what your player roles are. But you need to like have that, I think, in order for players to be engaged. Because if a game is really historically accurate, but it's not engaging, no one is going to learn anything from it anyway, because they're out of the game. They've left.
You know how it ends, so
ideally, yes.
So, parting from that, what is your first thing that you take for a game? You take an historic theme and then looking for the mechanics, or you have some mechanics and then looking for a theme that can just enter in these mechanics?
More often than not, I have the theme first and no idea what mechanically is going to happen. Every time, I have had an idea for a mechanic first and then tried to apply a theme, it is a disaster. It does not work out. It is an unfun game. It is boring. It is stupid, and I hate it. Now, I have played other games by other designers, and they can do that, but I do not have that gift. I am not blessed in that way.
That's good. Well, next. Who's next?
Timo, say something.
Oh, I was thinking that I was number 3, but okay.
That's all I was. No, there's no number 1 and number 2.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask you, Dan, one thing that I was reading the other day. If I'm not wrong, this game we're talking about In the Shadows, the first idea of the designing, it was at the Consing Game Jam, no? Something like this.
Yes.
Explain a little bit how it was and the idea of you were, if I'm not wrong, 3 designers, and explain a little bit.
I did not know I was going to be participating in the Consum Game Jam. I was coming out of the liquor store buying beer when my friend Joe Schmidt texted me,
Best.
would you like to be in the Consum Game Jam? And I didn't have anything going on that weekend, so I said, sure. We did not know what the challenge was going to be. There are constraints. There are like rules about what we can make a game about. They do not pertain to a topic, but they specify what game is being adapted or what system we are taking. And I joined that group with Joe Schmidt and Chris, who I had never met at all, like before that. I had met Joe one time in San Diego 2 years before the Game Jam. And it was just during the height of the pandemic. This is the thing we do as game designers when we're bored. We just make a game over a weekend. So that's what we did. So the Game Jam rules were to make a game using the components of a coin game.
Okay.
And then redesign a totally different game. And it could be on a different topic. And
so
many of the games that people made were coin games by repurposing the parts of other coin games, which did not feel very challenging to me. And I always want to make everything hard. So Joe, Chris, and I decided we were going to make a non-coin game, but we were going to use coin pieces. We used the Falling Sky map, and we're able to put stickers on the board to modify it. We were allowed to introduce brand new cards, because I don't know how you design a game about history without new cards. And then we used the coin pieces. So we knew that there was going to be some element of hidden insurgency, covert operations, things like that. I, at the time of designing this, knew almost nothing about the French resistance, like zero.
No way.
And Joe Schmidt knew as much as I did. Chris was our subject matter person. So we designed the game based off of he had an idea of like just a 1-page sequence of play idea and what kind of activities people would be doing. And then we went from there. So while we are designing the game and creating a tabletop simulator mod for it in 2 days, I designed the 20 historical cards for it. I read 3/4 of a book by Robert Gildia called Fighters in the Shadows, which is where we got the name for our book from. And then I read like a handful of abstracts and like journal articles to give me a rough idea of like what we were going to design on. And then we just went through that. Joe had some great design. He's great he has like so many mechanics, like just on his person at any time. It's like, I don't know if in Spain they had G.I. Joe, but there were these G.I. Joe figures in the 1980s. They had pockets everywhere. I feel like Joe Schmidt has pockets everywhere, and there's a design idea in his pocket. He just has something for every occasion. So it was perfect for us to be on the same team working on this game. We just clicked right away. We worked together really well. And after that weekend, we had a game that looked very nice. I don't think we thought it was great, but we liked how it looked, and we thought we were on the right track. And our game in Vagina Gara by Severio, and I'm never going to remember all 4 of their names. I'm very sorry.
No,
the designers of Vagina Gara, Corey, Matthew, like I know like 3 of these guys, but it's a lot. So, but they won the first prize for designing Vagina Gara out of the Gandhi components.
The Gandhi map.
Yes.
It's a very coin-like design. It's brilliant. I love it, but it's very, very much, it honors a lot of the coin system. And then we had like a different type of game that was mostly original. It didn't really fit neatly into a system. And we were the runners-up to that game, but we were signed with GMT like shortly afterward to published. So both of us had a game that was getting published. And as someone who has designed games for a few years and like had always dreamed of having a game published by GMT, I thought it was hilarious that I had ideas about games on United Fruit and their neo-colonialism like in Latin America, or a game about Iran, or a game about North Korea, but a World War II game was what I was going to get published. Oh, I could not believe it. I never even thought I would design that. It was hilarious to me. But every time I would tell Gene Billingsley of a game idea I had, he would just look at me like one eyebrow raised, like, seriously? Like, is that what you're making a game about? So this is very funny to me that this ended up happening. But it was a great process. I think I loved collaborating on it that weekend. Since we started it, Chris left the project because he's teaching at Stanford and doing like all this other game design stuff, and he just did not have the time to dedicate the project. And his heart was no longer in it as it was weekend during the pandemic. But Joe Schmidt and I had been working on it pretty steadily, and we had also reiterated the game probably about 3 or 4 times. So it's very different than it was that first weekend.
That's okay.
Because we read books, which is really good. I recommend doing that.
That's important.
Yeah, if you're designing historical games, you should read books.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
No, honestly, that's great. The one thing in regards to what you were saying now, it's as you were mentioning before, do you believe that in the game you feel that you are following even if there are changes that you can do option A or option B, that with the cards that you are playing what happened more or less in the history with the resistance in France?
Yeah. And I
so
also
the theme is present, is clearly present, the theme.
Yes. I have my favorite thing to try to incorporate into a game design is a small story.
Yeah.
But I don't want a small game. But it's hard to get design a game that drills all the way down to the point where if I'm making a game about the French Revolution, let's say, I want to include the story of a woman who steals furniture from the hunting lodge and then tries to sell it to make ends meet. How do you do that? It's so hard, right? But I have like all these little tiny things that I want to incorporate. And so for our game about French resistance, I wanted to incorporate stories about the different types of resistance there were, whether it was couriers, radio operators, people who were hiding resistance fighters, and then people who were part of the Maquisards, and like people who were like, the international brigades, people who were coming from the Spanish Revolution. Like I wanted like a lot of these stories, and it's just a matter of like also trying to be very open and receptive to how I think an American audience has certain views about various resistance movements as being like the version of success that they recognize always is military and nothing else. And I think that is a poor way of looking at insurgency and revolution, in particular because I think that's also evidenced by a lot of the insurgencies that America has faced in its various adventures throughout the Middle East and like all these other places, is they don't really understand exactly why popular movements happen, why they are so sticky and sort of they kind of have like a self-motivating thing. Like there's a lot of energy in those movements and they don't know where they come from and they don't know why they work. They don't know why they last. And I think that I thought the French resistance was an interesting place to start because Americans have like a certain kind of stereotype about like how the war was won and how the French resistance may not have really mattered that much from the typical American audience standpoint. Yeah. But to me, it was more important to see how people resist against what seems to be an immovable object and what calls them to that movement. And for the tip of the spear in the French resistance, it really breaks your heart to like read these stories because I think that for the most part, the early members of the resistance were European immigrants who had come to France. They'd already left these other places. And at a certain point, you just can't move anywhere. There's nowhere else to go. You have to draw a line, and it's easy for you to stand up and oppose an occupation when you know your ass is going to be the first one on the line, versus the people who felt like they could be a little complacent or toe the line because they weren't going to be the first ones that were put on a train heading back to Germany, or they weren't being sent to a camp or expatriated, and it wasn't they weren't like in that first group. So I think that like the initial resistance in France is really a resistance in France, but it's not very French. And then later on, it gains some traction and becomes very French. And that was another thing that we really wanted to kind of put in that model. But that weekend that we made the game, we didn't know that. Like, we didn't read enough and understand that stuff. You know what I mean? So I was glad to have time to kind of develop that idea and work on it with Joe.
So
that's great.
You have discovered this resistance from the idea making the game, from the resistant game. You have learned.
Yeah, it's funny how often you're working on a game and you have an idea. You'll read for like 18 months or 2 years, and then you start designing like after that period. So to start designing and you've read nothing is just insane to me. It's just so crazy. Like, it felt very weird and backwards, but it was a good challenge for sure.
It is.
But I think what you are saying, at least on the part that what we're saying, in the historical games, a lot of us, you say, okay, I want to play this game, okay, this war game, but later on you start saying, okay, I'm going to buy this book because it's related to the theme of what he's saying, and you start reading and reading and reading. You say, okay, now I understand why the designer, what you were saying, the historical part of the book. That is really important, and not so many people read this information. But honestly, in my opinion, it's really even more important that the only game that you are playing something that what happened, and this is the reason that the designer has done this because of this or that.
Yeah,
it's really, really important.
Especially when you talk to a designer and you find out their one book recommendation for the game that they just designed. Like if you talk to like Kim Kanger, like who designed Dien Bien Phu, Final Gamble or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember if it was now Hell in a Very Small Place or what the second book was, but I do know I read both of them the year that I got that game. Because I had seen a review by Bruce Garrick that was excellent, like on YouTube. And also, they were just excellent. It was an excellent game. It was very stressful. I just thought it was wonderfully done. And then I read the book, and then I immediately wanted to go back and play the game. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You see?
Yes. So I get that. And it's great when I think if you design a thematic game that works, you can create a literacy with a topic. Which is something I learned from interviewing another game designer, professional word game designer, Betsy Joslin. But she said, like, you don't gain an expertise on a topic from playing a game, but you'll gain a literacy, and that literacy that you take to the reading that you do afterward, that's what's going to gain this deepening of knowledge and appreciation for that subject matter.
That's it.
Okay, that's great. And going into the mechanics of the game, maybe I'm wrong, but do you love Hannibal? It's true that you love Hannibal, or there is one word game that you like, and if I'm not wrong, it's a CDG game. Something is Hannibal or another one that you love?
Yeah, he said Hannibal Simonich.
Or
so many CDGs.
Simonich, but Simonich no, it's not.
Hannibal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Simonich is just amazing. That game was fabulous to me, and I think part of it was I played Hannibal before We the People, and it was very interesting because when I played We the People, the card combat is a neat system that doesn't really make sense in the Revolutionary War, but in the Second Punic War, it's very thematic. It makes a ton of sense. And he also found a great way to integrate elephant attacks, which is one thing you can't do with that card system. Like, they would have just wrecked everything. And I just felt like he just has this thing of every historical design is about a lot of problems being thrown at the designer and watching them bat them all away. And Simonich is very good at like swat, and just every hair in place, no sweat on the brow. He's exactly done everything he needed to do. And I just was very impressed with that. And that's sort of my high watermark. That and Maria are like kind of what I kind of judge a lot of games for, as far as elegance and like being very tight and integrating that history.
No, just to finish this question, the question was related to this. In your mind, you were thinking about this type of mechanics when you were thinking about cards, or it was nothing related to this when you start using the cards for this game, or in the shadow?
I would think for the French Resistance game in the Shadows, the cards were very different from how I would have used them. Joe Schmidt's idea was for suits on the cards.
Okay.
And my idea was to have, if we're going to do that type of thing, having the event on the top of the card and then put the ops on the bottom. So that way we know that the event is going to trigger first and then we're going to do the action. Just allocating these things in a more intuitive way. But his suit idea I thought was brilliant. And when we felt we've encountered a little resistance when we were playtesting it, because people were like, well, what does that mean? Like, why are these suits kind of here? And it was like, well, these factions, these resistance groups don't actually coordinate with each other. They don't really talk with each other. And then for the Germans, it's just because they're not French. They just don't know what the hell's going on anywhere they go. And so they're relying on French militias and police to go find resistance fighters and do that. Yeah. And, you know, to their credit, like, they're militia and they're collaborators. So they are, what's the term? Pieces of shit. But they are also like their heart isn't really in arresting their own countrymen. So they are kind of half-assing that too. So they do a thing like where, I found a few of them, but I'm not going to arrest anybody. Like, they're over here if you want to go get them. And then later on, the Germans take care of it. So it's just like very wild. Like, this lack of coordination worked for both sides. And I thought the suit system is actually a really neat way, because they go into this other precinct and they don't know how things work because they think it's this national system, and it's not a national system. It's like more localized than that. And for the resistance groups, it's a lot more of like, these socialists don't talk to those communists because they read this different newspaper, and like, it's just like a different thing, you know what I mean? Like, so you just have like a lot of these interesting little sectarian squabbles that you can incorporate into the design without needing an event to keep reminding people. But yeah, I'm glad I worked with Joe. That game is a huge turning point in like how I design now. I think that I used to be very oriented toward Chrome, and I'm a less Chrome-minded designer because of that experience.
Conti.
Well, let me make you a question talking about thematic war games or thematic historical games. Today is something like could be said a golden age of thematic games with series like Coin, Levy and Campaign, and we have it here in Spain. We have a designer, Carlos Marquez, has designed a game called The Other Side of the Hill, based on a theme about the high command of the German army, and so do you think that the war gaming today is not only X and counters, but much more thematic war gaming?
Yes, and I think that is great. I am very for that, because I want to see a lot more topics being covered in general. But that said, I am still a sucker whenever I hear that there's a new Hex and Counter War game out that is on the topic that I want to play. And I do think there's new stuff being done in those systems. I think that there is innovation still there, which I find with designers that I talk to in my community when I go to a convention. There's a little bit of a generational divide in regard to those designs. And I don't always agree with all of the opinions that are kind of coming out. But for example, like I played La Primogenita, Kim Kanger's last game for Legion War Games. That system is excellent. I couldn't see your shelf. It's a little tiny, Sergio, but yes. In case anyone is interested, I made cards for the order chits and put them as files that are up for public consumption on Board Game Geek.
I have it.
But converting them to cards seems like the way to go. Probably a little bit easier because you don't have to go back to a play aid to look up what the chit does.
Yeah.
It's just on the card, and then you're choosing it each time. Now you are rifling through like 40 cards when you're deciding what orders you're going to play, but I think you're going to find 12 of your favorite, and the other ones you're not doing. So, but I thought his system was brilliant, and I think there's a lot there to get to explore, and I hadn't played anything like that since, but there's a lot going on, I think, in both areas. And then when I see that there's a game, Battle of Versailles, have you seen that? Like the fashion game that's got a lot of war game mechanics in it.
Yeah, it is.
That was a game I was joking with some content creators here in the States about making, and somebody made it. And they were like, it's just, I was delighted. I loved seeing that.
Yeah.
Every time you see an idea that you had for like a half second made, you're like, oh, thank God I don't have to make that. You're like, on to the next. It saves a lot of time.
But now that you are saying that, Santiago was saying a little bit in regards to mechanics, but now I'm talking about people. For example, we are seeing that at least in Spain, but we believe in the whole Europe, a lot of war gamers. Okay, maybe what you were saying, we are started with role-playing games, board games, historical games right now, but more people and more people each time that you go to conventions in general, at least in Spain, but I would say in Europe, you see more people playing these new war games or historical games. Do you feel that in the US is exactly the same case? More people, they start playing these type of board games due to the history, and later on, so the theme is priority, and later on they play the mechanics?
Yeah, I think some of that shift has been because of the change in themes and like who it incorporates, because the games are probably more modern. I mean, they can't help but be more modern, right? And then part of it is that there's an integration of some Euro themes and like Euro mechanics that are being paired with a historical theme. And so that makes it seem a little more innovative. And then the other part is that the graphic design for these 70s war games is not fantastic.
No.
It does not have table presence, as the kids will say. And that works against them too. But I think that if there were, when you look at some games that they might not be hex and counter, but they're still very much war games, whether they're at the squadron level, whether it's Command and Colors, or whether it's something that has like a, even Fire and Stone, Siege of Vienna, that came out from Capstone last year.
Really beautiful
There's
game.
hexes on that map. Now, I know there's not counters, it's cute little wooden pieces, but I am fascinated by the fact that lands, it's very, like, it's received very favorably by people like my nephews, despite the fact they do not play any hex and counter games, but they like that game. And I think it's because it's beautiful. It's like fresh looking, and it's also short and manageable. Like, we can play, he can lose, and then we can switch sides and play again. Like, that's very nice.
Yeah, it is.
Whereas Downfall is on my dining room table for like 2 days, 3 days.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm turning that into like a part-time job to get that thing finished. Like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Timo has mentioned conventions. Well, as far as I know, you have been part of the San Diego HistCom board in the past or this year. I can't remember. We four here are part of a board of Basel Forever Con. Is a convention in Madrid, in the historical city of Alcalá de Henares. What is the role of conventions, wargaming conventions today? Do you think that they help in some way to the hobby?
Yes. And I think they contribute largely to design, probably more than to more to fans than and players, I would say. But they're important because when we talk about trying to grow the hobby over time, essential to that is players being able to see themselves in the hobby. I think trying to get a more diverse group of players to show up to conventions, the first people who are going to be interested in showing up are the people who want to design and are interested in design. And then they create the traction to get more people into the hobby to play. And it may just be a conveyor belt that just keeps bringing people into design. And I'm totally fine with that too. But I've noticed that in San Diego, it's a significantly more diverse group of people going to that convention, playing games there. And also the games that we see at the tables, I think the assumption is it's going to be more modern stuff. It's going to be more Euro. It's more modern, but it's not more Euro. They're playing like Border Reavers and playing like Here I Stand. I mean, they're playing freaking war games. Like that's what they're doing there. And it's great. But it's also interesting to see the people who they come one year and then the next year they bring a prototype under their arm and they're showing it to people. And that's how my first San Diego HistCon, I went to meet Brian Train and like one other designer and to bother them. And that was what I did. And it was great. And I had a great time. And then when I went to Consum World Expo in Arizona for the first time, I played a lot of war games, but I wasn't going to be playing that weekend. It was to meet a publisher and then to meet other designers. And so I met Harold Buchanan, who's part of the SD HistCon board, and he introduced me to Amabel Holland and to all these other designers. But I just met these folks from like various publishers and designers and just immediately started like kind of chatting them up and building a little network. And it's been great because part of it isn't just to promote your own games. I think that those conventions are really essential to just seeing what other work people are doing. And it really expands your concept of what kind of games you can make, especially within that. The smaller publishers, the self-publishers, and I like CSW because VUCA comes out to it. Nuts, like you see like a little bit of a European presence kind of creeping over there. And I know it's a long flight, but it's still like a big deal for someone who doesn't live on a coast to be able to go to a convention and see some of those.
Okay. Well, Santiago has not told you then, but in any case, you are more than welcome in Spain, that's for sure. And of course,
I love it.
You are more than welcome to come to Alcalá. And also, Pax Ludica, that is Sergio's in Cádiz, okay?
Very nice.
So if you want to come, or Madrid in June, or Cádiz, that is Pax Ludica in September, you are more than welcome.
Oh man, honestly. June is so tempting because it's like right near Primavera. I can like go to Barcelona and come up. That's what I did here when I visited Madrid, so it's perfect. But yeah, that's very tempting. I will definitely keep that in mind for sure.
And what you were saying is true that, for example, this year, I don't know if you know Nils Johansson and Walter Perdowski. Both of them, they are really well-known designers, and they are coming to Alcalá, okay? But
very nice.
Of course, a lot of Spanish designers that they have their prototypes, and for sure, you know, Carlos that has designed Carlos Díaz, the designer of the Tanto Monta, and he's also coming. So a lot of designers, Spanish and Europeans mainly, they are coming to show their prototypes and to discuss, as you were mentioning, players, other designers.
Yeah.
And that is, in my opinion, as you were saying, also another sign of the world health of this hobby right now nowadays. Yeah.
And now
I
we
have
can
never been to a designer's house that had very few games on the shelf. I'm just putting that out there. They own a lot of games. It starts. That's how the sickness starts, and then eventually their designing is. It's sort of what it is.
Yeah.
now we can talk a little about some threats for the hobby, to the hobby.
Sure.
I mean, you know, mainly from the graphic designers, the artists, so they are quite concerned about artificial intelligence. Stepping on the hobby and putting them apart in some way. But do you think that it's possible that in some years, I mean, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, artificial intelligence could be a threat not only for graphic artists but also for designers?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
in,
It could be a threat
10
for
years we can
literally
be
every
playing.
industry, doing anything, like all of it. It's just all of it. Big threat for sure. Big threat energy. I could see that. I do think historical game design is a lot more challenging to synthesize what you're going to implement. I don't know that it'll design great games, but it could design something that looks ish, I guess, and you could probably get something there. I think, thankfully, game design doesn't pay that well now. So the idea of losing that as a job has almost no impact in my world. I've never been to do much of anything.
Probably it's cheaper to pay a designer than to build up an artificial intelligence that is
Right. I
able
think
to.
that database is going to be sad, and I don't think that whoever codes that is just not going to. They're not going to get paid either. Like no one's getting paid anything. But I think the artwork, like when I did a game for a publisher that will remain nameless, and I did all the artwork for it except one component. I did the design, and I had a friend of mine develop the game. And I made less money than a gentleman who was asked to design one counter sheet. Like, all told, it's just like very sad. I cannot imagine someone programming an AI to do that.
No.
And then not having that AI at least be sharp enough to be self-aware. If they're good enough to do a design, they'll become self-aware, and then they're gonna like that's what's gonna happen. Unavoidable. I don't know. But the artwork thing, I'm more concerned about, because to me that's the element of these games that kind of gives them their. I think we underestimate sometimes how much the look of a game and the look of a map is actually what first draws our eye
Exactly.
when we're looking at a game and playing it. And I think about for like Nils Johansson's maps and Ivan Carceres, who did like a lot of great map artwork for, I think, like Granada and what was the game I was just looking? 1812, War on the Great Lakes, and things like that.
Even
just fantastic artwork, like all around. But it's like the work that they're doing. It's something also we didn't really see in the hobby in decades past. Like there's this more of a willingness to embrace illustration, like on the cover of a box, but in terms of like the components and the things we put out. I think that's starting to become more of a normal thing, or something we see more frequently in the hobby than we did even like 20 years ago. And I think that is really good. I think the historical photo, like the sepia tone on the box that makes me sad, is like not the best foot forward for the hobby, and probably doesn't draw a lot of eyes to games. But I think if we have games that look beautiful, like people will take a moment, take a beat at a convention and stop and look and see what's getting played. So if we have a game that looks beautiful, and then they stop and check it out, and then it makes them feel something, there's a good chance we've got that person there to like play a game and then maybe play it again, or look at other games in that same genre. But I think that AI is just another way to make a lot of the games look kind of bland and sort of similar to one another, because they're all stealing from the same database of artwork and then churning out like a, I don't know, a box image with a guy with 7 fingers on one hand. I don't know. I'm not playing that. It's just like, I don't care about that. It's fine. Perhaps if it was like Inigo Montoya themed or something like that, maybe then I'll.
Javi.
I'm in charge of the last block, which I thought it was going to be the most fun part, but after these 50 minutes, it's not going to be the most fun part. It's been amazing. So get ready. Okay, these are questions about choosing between mom and dad without thinking, whatever comes to your mind first. All right. So the first one is: do you prefer an epic 8-hour game or 5 quick games at the same time?
Epic game, for sure.
All right. So which famous designer would you like to play with?
Mark Simonich, but I'm afraid of him a little bit. I'm low-key afraid of him, actually.
Okay. So surprising yet complex mechanics or simple yet addictive ones?
Simple.
Addictive mechanics or yeah, okay. Would you change a fundamental rule in a classic or leave them untouched?
I like changing rules. I think that's a designer illness. When we playtest each other's games, we're just ruining them and talking shit about their work in front of them. That's like what we're doing. I love it. I wouldn't change, but we know when we invite them to the table that this is about to happen.
Which game was the first one that you touch a lot and changed the game?
Oh, that is a really good question. I think it's Junta, which has been coming up a little bit more recently because I'm working on a game on United Fruit that I'm trying to get ready in a design sprint in the next 2 weeks. But Junta, for those who don't know, was released, I think, a couple times. The first time was 79. I never played the 79 version. I played the 1985 version. I believe it was released by West End Games. I played it when I was in 6th grade. And we were already changing rules for it.
And you changed the game.
The two that I remember that we changed that stand out are more recent changes, because anything I did as a kid is probably moronic, like probably terrible. But the two that we had was, I don't know if you remember, there's like a stack of bills in it from the foreign aid, and all the bills are the same color. Like I think they're blue in the old version. We had 3 bright red 4 million peso bills that were larger than the rest of the deck and stuck out. And you could see them at any time where they were at in the deck. And they were part of the budget that would get drawn out to players. So the idea is you didn't know how much money each player would be giving, just how many bills they were being dealt.
Okay.
But those red bills, everybody knew they were 4s. And if one was on top of the stack, you couldn't play a card to just take it and pocket it. It had to be dealt out during the budget. So that was one of the rules that I added. And then the other one was we added a 8th player, cabinet member, and they were the and security, and they were responsible for 1 vote, but they didn't control any of the Army, Air Force, Navy, or anything. But their sole job was to prevent any kind of insurgency or any kind of juntas, which was impossible because they had no troops and they were probably not being given any money to do anything. So we just did that so that way we'd be able to have an 8th person at the table. But yeah, not always improvements on the game, but they were little wrinkles. That's like how you start thinking about this.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. If you could play a board game anywhere in the world, would you prefer in a historical library or in a busy and bustling cafe? In a cafe full of people
historical
or a
site
library?
for sure. Like a library is great, but I mean, if you're like playing Friedrich in one of Friedrich's castles or something, I mean, that's pretty perfect, right? Like, kind of have a little bit more of a ambiance when you're playing a game.
All right. would you prefer to play against a strategic and cerebral opponent or a fun and chaotic one?
I like a strategic opponent. I lose a lot of games. I play a lot and I lose most of the time.
So you are the chaotic.
Yes. Roll me. Destroy me. It's fine.
Okay. And the last one, if your favorite board game come to life, what or who would you be?
Oh, good Lord. They're all so violent. I think I should probably reevaluate what kind of game. I don't want to be playing Game of Thrones, like in real life. I don't want to be playing Second Punic War. I'm going to get trampled by an elephant. Probably what I brought there, right? Twilight Struggle. I mean, I don't know. I caught the tail end of the Cold War. I didn't miss it. I don't really want to be there. That's the problem with historical games. Like, I don't really want to be. I want to be immersed, but afar. I want to be back a little bit, you know. Because it is like Volko calls it a paper time machine, but it is a time machine to something dreadful, normally speaking. I don't need to visit. I just want to look at it under glass, I guess.
Good.
Okay. So we're done. Thank you very much for your answers.
That's it.
Well, thanks.
It has been easy, no? It has been easy, Dan.
That was great, and I am proud of myself for not turning a lot of questions on you. It's been a bad habit. That podcast ruined me for interviews in a way. Flipping questions all the time.
No, it's just been a wonderful hour. You are very funny and very communicative. So it's great. And this was our first experience in English. Well, we had one before with a French designer, which was kind of a nightmare because we didn't understand him very well. And
that is not the stereotype of a designer. You know, when you think about a designer, you think about not a grumpy old man, but I mean, you know, gray hair, glasses, very reflexive, whatever. And that is quite the opposite. So lively.
Yeah, I think it's fun to kind of see the gamut. I've done interviews with some designers where it's clear they only want to talk about their game in a way that is very normal.
Yeah.
Like keep it normalmente. I don't really need it. And it's like I can do that, but I'm not having any fun. Like if we do the interview that way, you know. And I have noticed that over time I'm more inclined to interview people who design games that are very different than the types of games I like, but they are more fun interviews because they engage with design in a more playful way.
Yeah.
And I find there's a lot in, especially historical design, where people are subject matter experts and they're academics and they know a lot about their subject and they can talk about their subject a lot, but they can't really talk about other things in a very easy going way, I suppose.
Good.
Yeah, it was very easy going. That's a word. Yeah. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
And
thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
This is very fun.
Thank you. It has been fun. It has been fun.
Okay.
I will hope to make it to your area
exactly,
at some point for a convention.
We're waiting you in Madrid, okay?
Oh man, I would love it. That'd be so great. I gotta hit my Duolingo a little bit harder. Because if I can't talk shit at the game table, I'm not gonna enjoy myself. It's very difficult.
We believe that.
Sergio, you're gonna say something to finish that thing?
Yeah,
I'm going
to. Well, thank you, Dan, for coming back to Mesa de Guerra for the third time. You are the first one to reach the third time to coming here.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 written and this one talking. We hope you to visit again in the future. you're very welcome to come to Madrid, Cadiz, and also this man over here, the gray-haired one, is also one of the collaborator organizing another convention in Murcia. So we are 4, but 3 of us organizers of convention in Spain.
Very nice.
You're very welcome to come to any of us. Thank you for this time.
Yeah, we are friends. We are friends. It doesn't matter if you choose Cadiz or Murcia.
No. You have to come to Cadiz. You have to come to Cadiz. So thank you for coming. That's it.
You can choose in the center of the country, the Atlantic coast, or the Mediterranean coast. You can choose.
Well, every time I hit Spain, I visit like 3 cities or so. So it's like how it goes, I guess. Just trying to eat my way across the country.
Yeah.
It's the only way to do it.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for having me. If you have any follow-ups or anything on any of the questions, or like some weird edit, just let me know. But I'll be excited for it comes out, and I would be happy to do a 4th whenever you get around to it. Maybe I'll have some other games coming out long before then, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much,
Danny.
Bye-bye.
Good
Have
night.
a good evening.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.